Hello and welcome to Chapter 9, Introductions and Conclusions. Previously we've discussed the body of the speech, the main points, the subpoints, the support, and all of that requires great creativity, a lot of research, a lot of different information. So where the body is very complex at times, very creative, or a lot of potential for creativity, the introductions and conclusions are very formulaic. They are going to have the same components in every single speech. The reason for this is because the introductions and conclusions have certain components that perform specific functions that are required for every speech. So let's dive right into Chapter 9. How do we prepare these introductions? We, because first impressions are frankly important. Introductions allow for a good first impression so that the audience understands what's going to happen in the speech, and in general, improve your credibility. So, when preparing, we should create the body first, not the introduction, not the conclusion, the body. Because how do we know what we're introducing until we know the speech? Also, the introduction should be relatively brief, 15% of the speech time at maximum, because you are simply introducing the topic. Also, make it complete. It should have every single component of the introductions, and when it doesn't, it should at least have some marker for it. Like, for example, an hook can also be a motivator, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then plan the introduction word for word. This can be very useful to create a positive first impression. So, the functions. What's the point? What does an introduction need to have? It needs to grab the audience's attention, reveal the topic clearly, inspire audience interest in your topic, create rapport, establish personal credibility, and even give the audience a preview and structure of the speech. And with those functions, there is a component for each and every one of these to fulfill each of these functions. The greeting welcomes the audience and creates rapport. The attention device grabs the audience's attention. The significance statement shows them why. Why is it important for them to listen? Also, credibility statement shows why I am a credible source for this information. Sharing the topic is to share the topic, and then preview is to give the audience a structure by which to understand the speech. So the content areas match the functions of of every introduction. So we start by breaking it down a little bit. First, we have the greeting. This is again the simplest part. Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? A warm conversational tone just to build rapport with the audience. Next, we have the attention device, and there's many ways to grab the audience's attention, but there are some ways that are effective, some ways that are maybe not as effective for different topics. So that's why there's many of them. First, we could ask a question. Could either be for a direct response, how many people own an iPhone, or a rhetorical question that makes us think. We also could refer to a recent or historical event. Speaking about the college tuition scandal of a few years ago could be a way that you can grab the audience's attention about education inequalities in the college system we have now. You could even make a reference to the audience by asking someone, who has $1, bringing someone up, involving them in some way. You could even talk about some experience that the audience has had. And this can also lead into finding common ground. You can ask, have you ever had an experience when this thing happened? You could refer to an occasion. to the occasion. If it is a historical event, you can talk about why this event is so historic, so significant. You could even begin with a quotation. You can begin with a hypothetical situation. Imagine you have no financial worries. Imagine your career goals are met. Imagine you have everything you want, or sorry, you even have enough sleep. What's left? Relationships. By starting out with something like that, it makes the audience start to think about a hypothetical situation. You could begin with a story. Um, One time I was riding my bike and I was hitting this turn super sharply and I went over the handlebars and I skidded my arms, my face, and I was bleeding all over the place. I limped home, put some band-aids on, and the next day I went to school. Right after that, I went on my bike because when we experience failure, we have to be able to pick ourselves back up. By starting with a story, it engages the audience in these sorts of ways. You could even reveal a startling statistic like this one, an interesting one, I'll say. You could also use humor when appropriate. Okay, so two nuts are chasing each other. One turns to the other and says, I'm a cashew. Today I'm going to talk about the Revolutionary War. Of course, it has to be appropriate for the topic as well as an appropriate joke that doesn't involve any profanity or anything that would diminish your credibility. You could also refer to previous speeches, refer to personal interest in the story, in your topic, as well as using an analogy. Again, talking about the who has a dollar, you could create an analogy of someone borrowing a dollar with trust. Next, we have next part of this. So we've talked about the attention device. Once we have grabbed the audience's attention, then we need a topic revelation statement. This is the most interesting, most important part of the speech, and it has to be the clearest part of the speech. A single sentence with a with a communication of time for the next few minutes, a communicating verb, I will describe, I will inform, I will persuade, and then a precise description of the topic using vibrant adjectives. I will inform you of the dire treatment of the African elephant through poaching. Something like that. So, this is again an incredibly important part because it communicates your topics directly and explicitly, and if that is not clear, then we won't know the point of your speech. Next, we have a significance statement. This is 1 to 3 sentences that show the importance of this topic for the audience. You should use personal language to your specific audience using words like our rather than yours, because with significance, when you are talking about ways that it affects both of us, it improves your credibility, also improves that if this can affect me, it can affect you too. Using source citation can be incredibly effective for this. Personal testimony can also be very strong because when the audience is starting to identify with you, then if it affects you, it can also affect them. Using source citation, using statistics, can show how this problem or this topic can or has affected a large population. Next, we have a credibility statement. This is to show that you are qualified to speak about this. This could talk to your personal relationship with the topic. For example, if you're talking about Batman, you could talk about all the experience you've had or the relationship you've had with Batman. Either I've had all the comics, I've watched all the TV shows, I've ridden the Batmobile. That can show your credibility. Also, you can talk to your prior experience with the topic without obviously sounding boastful. And then lastly, we have previewing the main points. First, I'm going to talk about this. Second, I'm going to talk about this. third, I'm going to talk about this. This should be a brief, clear list of your main points. The reason why it should be brief and obviously in the same order that you're going to actually present it is because if you give the audience a roadmap of where they're going to go in the speech, it allows them to cognitively structure the information that they hear throughout their speech because they know which part goes where. Also, it gives them a little bit of personal satisfaction that they are in the know of what's going to happen in the speech. So, when preparing the introduction, construct the introduction last, make it relevant, be succinct, and also write it out for word for word. We've just talked about the introduction. Now we're going to move into the conclusion. The big functions of the conclusion are to prepare the audience for the end. It's the worst thing in the world for a speech to be incredibly good from beginning to middle, and then at the end it just sort of ends. Because it just automatically ends, and you don't really know, and it diminishes the speech, the impact of the speech from that point. Also presents, you should also be presenting any final appeals, summarize and close your argument or your information, and with a clincher, and appeal and challenge the audience into further action for a persuasive speech. So, when preparing this, we should prepare the body first, as we've said before, because how do we know what you're concluding until you know the speech? Also, keep the conclusion brief. Make it complete, make it memorable, and have it memorized and practiced. I'm going to tie to something real quick with the introduction and conclusion. The reason why memorization and practice might be useful is because of the primacy recency effect. The primacy recency effect states that we remember what happens first and we remember what happens last. And some of the middle stuff we tend not to maybe remember as well as we could. When we have an effective introduction and conclusion that grab the audience's attention, but also review what we've just talked about, then we remember what we've talked about. And those things stick out to us. So some of the parts of the conclusion. First, we restate the purpose of the speech, the topic. First, I've talked about this. I have talked about this topic. Then restate the main points. I did this by discussing 1, 2, and 3, your main points, and then tie back to the introduction for impact. So if I have talked about peanuts and I started off with the joke, how many nuts does it, or two nuts are chasing each other, one turns to the other and says, I'm a cashew, then I might tie back to that with a call to the attention getter by saying, I hope that this presentation was not too nutty. And for persuasive speeches, using a call to action, telling them what to do next, challenging them to act on this new information. When composing this conclusion, you should prepare the conclusion at the end and throughout the speech, because as you're going through, you're going to find things that might be useful. Don't include new information in the conclusion, and follow the structure of the conclusion. That concludes today's video lecture. Have a wonderful rest of your day.